Please don't forget the money, man.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up.
All right, so let's get an NBA check-in here. Everyone's got fewer than 10 games to go. They're in the 4 to 7 game range right now. Miami is currently in first place in the East at 49 and 28. Milwaukee's 48 and 29, and Boston is 48 and 30. Those teams constantly juggling for those top 3 spots. The Philadelphia 76ers are 46 and 30, so they're only a couple games back. Chicago Bulls at 45 and 32. And the Toronto Raptors, a surprising 45 and 32 this season as well, currently sitting in that 6th seed spot. Now our play-in bracket, as of the moment of recording, heading into the Saturday night slate, has the Cleveland Cavaliers at 42 and 35, the Brooklyn Nets at 40 and 37. Charlotte Hornets are currently locked into the play-in bracket as well at 40 and 37, and the Hawks have worked their way in at 40 and 37. Eliminated from the playoffs altogether, Washington Wizards, New York Knicks, Indiana Pacers, Pistons, and Orlando Magic. So no shocks there. Orlando Magic 20 and 58. Jalen Suggs, not quite the player that they hoped in the rookie year. Obviously, Franz Wagner has worked out to be the best draft pick out of that bunch. He's currently averaging 15.3 points, 4.6 rebounds, 2.9 assists. He's played in all 78 games for the Orlando Magic. At least 14 more, I think, than any other player, which is crazy. But he is by far and large the best young guy that they have on that group right now. So going forward, he'll be a great building block for that group. Cade Cunningham has come along for the Detroit Pistons after missing a good chunk at the beginning of that season. His shooting isn't looking as great statistically, but being forced into a role where he's the lead playmaker will change as they add more pieces to that group. He's played 62 games this season, averaging 17.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. But again, his season's almost over, and we'll see what Detroit continues to build along there. The Indiana Pacers at 25 and 53 have really just bombed out. They've lost 6 straight. They lost Ricky Rubio back in February to a foot injury, to a knee injury, actually. They lost Miles Turner to a foot injury. They did flip out Sabonis in a big trade to the Sacramento Kings, which of course brought in Tyrese Halliburton, a fantastic young guard, and Buddy Hield. The pieces were in place for this to not be a team that was quite as bad as its record, but the injuries and kind of the redundancy of Miles Turner and Sabonis not being able to operate together, 2 of your better players, just really caused a lot of problems. So moving forward, going into the offseason, they'll have to decide if they're going to re-sign Ricky Rubio, TJ Warren, Lance Stevenson, who's picked up as a free agent who hasn't played in a few years. He's been quite productive for them as a role player. Malcolm Brogdon will be back next year on an expiring Buddy Hield, Miles Turner, and of course Tyrese Halliburton. So those 4 will be back. But Indiana will have to see what it wants to do with various pieces to even stay in contention for the East clearly. Now the New York Knicks were a little bit unexpected. You have the old additive that Tom Thibodeau's personality wore down the team. They were a great turnaround on defense, one of the best defensive teams in the league last season. This year it was a little bit different. Now you're questioning the team's talent again. RJ Barrett has been explosive in his second year as an offensive player. He's posting up huge numbers, averaging 20 points per game, just over 20 points per game, 5.9 rebounds, 2.9 assists, and he's been very efficient. Julius Randle still averaging 20 points per game, almost 10 rebounds, 5 assists. But this team just isn't quite getting it done. Evan Fournier brought over in the trade last season with the Celtics. The Magic has not quite been as effective. Derrick Rose entering his twilight. Kemba Walker, not even with the team anymore. He'll be moved. So another team that's restructuring. Cam Reddish was added in a trade. So Tom Thibodeau, probably out as coach here. That's already circulating. He's been known to wear down his teams, although he does adjust what they're able to do defensively. We'll see what the personality is coming in and what the Knicks are going to do moving forward. Again, only 11 games under 500. They probably won't get close, much closer in their last handful of games. The remaining schedule is a road game at Orlando, who's still hanging tough, home against Brooklyn, at Washington, home against Toronto. So maybe they pick up a couple games. We'll see. But it's not looking good for the Knicks right now. And finally, the Washington Wizards, also at 34-43. The fifth team that's been eliminated and won't be involved in the next couple weeks. Bradley Beal finishes the season averaging 23 points, 4.7 rebounds, 6.6 assists. He'll probably average, right around there, adding the last few games on. Kristaps Porzingis obviously added at the trade deadline. He actually finishes with 22-point average. Only played in 14 games. 14 games. But he's the piece that they added to kind of appease Beal in trying to keep things on life support here in Washington in his career. Kyle Kuzma, 17 points per game, the third leading scorer. And Montrezl Harrell had a nice resurgence earlier, but this squad will be hoping that Bradley Beal picks up his $36 million player option on his contract to return to play with Porzingis next year and move forward with this group. But it's not looking super promising. They don't have a lot coming off the books. But let's skip ahead off those groups for now. Playing in the play-in at this current moment, there's a 3-game gap between Toronto Raptors at 6 and Cleveland Cavaliers at 7. So let's assume at the moment that without a massive surge here, where a couple of those teams, Chicago or Toronto, drop down, and Cleveland or Brooklyn keep winning, that we will pretty much have Cleveland, Brooklyn, and Atlanta in the play-in group here, unless they're somehow able to make up the 3-game gap. So the Cleveland Cavaliers have actually lost 14 of their past 22 games, so they're kind of limping to the finish line here with a few injuries starting to kind of pack up here. Jared Allen's been hurt, and that certainly affects the length that this team is able to put on the floor. Evan Mobley has been a little touched up. Colin Sexton was obviously lost for the season way back in November due to a meniscus tear. And this team has kind of lost some energy coming in to the back half of the season. Darius Garland is averaging 21.5 points and 8.7 assists per game, and he's been the revelation on this team and the engine that's really made it go, even when Sexton went down earlier in the season when he was averaging 16 points per game, so that's no surprise here. Rookie Evan Mobley is in the running for Rookie of the Year and has been all season, although Cade Cunningham has backed up in his performance and will probably maybe finish around third with Scotty Barnes obviously taking some first-round votes as well. Possibly steal the first place award away from Mobley with his performance on the Toronto Raptors and pushing them into the playoffs in the current 6th spot. But Evan Mobley averaging 14.9 points per game, 8.3 rebounds, and it's really contesting every shot and being able to quickly recover on the help side defense and make up for any misses on man-to-man defense, just being wherever he needs to be and just completely as one man on the field being a dominant presence on the interior, exterior, wherever he needs to be. Just a dominant defensive force for this Cavs team and providing a lot of length that's been challenging for opponents. Now, the final stretch for them will be brutal. They've got a home game against Philly, a road game against the Orlando Magic. So, home game against Philly, road game against Orlando, road game against Brooklyn, and a home game against Milwaukee, who will probably, again, most of these teams will probably not be resting. They're still fighting for positioning going to the playoffs here. All of them are. So there's a good chance that they take a lot of losses here heading into the home stretch. So they're still locked into the play-in, but where they end up exactly in this, it's hard to tell exactly. As a reminder, how does the play-in work? Well, the 7th and 8th place teams, when the regular season ends, will play each other, and the winner will get the 7th seed. And then the 9th and 10th place teams will play each other, and the winner of the 9-10 game will play the loser of the 7-8 game, and they will get the 8th seed. So basically, the winner of the 7th-8th game is automatically in, and then the loser of the 9-10 game is automatically out. And the winner of the lower game and the loser of the higher game then battles it out for that last spot. So if the Cavaliers schedule, they could drop from the current 7 spot, where it's a win and they're in, and a lose and they have one more shot at it. It's possible that they lose and lose a couple more games here and end up in that 9-10 game, where it's a 1-game elimination, and you have to win 2 games to make it in. That's probably what they're looking at right now. Brooklyn in the 8th hole is positions much better. Their final schedule is a road game against Atlanta, home against Houston, road game against the New York Knicks, home against Cleveland, home against Indiana. So again, Houston, Indiana, New York, not going to be involved in the playoffs. Probably not going to get full strength from those folks, not as involved. Home game against Cleveland was a team they're going to be much better positioned against. And a road game against Atlanta, who's also in this play-in, but another team that they're much better than and should have the ability to defeat. A game that'll probably be over by the time that you're listening to this podcast, so you'll actually know the result. Now, Brooklyn probably can't make up the 3-game difference on Toronto to make it up to that 6th seed spot to stay out of the play-in. But they'll try their damnedest to stay, to move up into that 7th spot, to stay in the 7-8 game and make sure that they only have to play in one play-in game, win that game, and make sure they get themselves into the 7th seed. Everyone wants to see what this team is going to be like when we finally get, of course, Ben Simmons on the court for the first time this season. That has not happened yet. Kyrie Irving can now play at home. The state has allowed performers to perform at indoor venues if they're not vaccinated. So we've got Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant now playing together. Seth Curry and Andre Drummond were great additions as part of that trade with Philly to bring Ben Simmons in. Bruce Bowen has been an excellent contributor since he was brought in a couple seasons ago. Goran Dragic has been playing some time, has not been great. So what the actual, will he be involved in the actual play-up lineup? I don't. It's hard to see once Ben Simmons gets involved in what he's able to contribute. I'd imagine it'd be Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, no surprise there. Andre Drummond, until he's played off the floor in certain situations. Seth Curry, Bruce Bowen, and then is it going to be Claxton, Patty Mills, Dragic? I don't know. I'm interested to see, again, a team that's not healthy, like several teams that we're going to be going through here, what the actual lineup is going to be, not only regular season, but now we're actually in the playoffs, what the lineup and rotation is going to look like for this group. Very excited to see the Brooklyn Nets, especially because they're going to be playing Miami or Milwaukee or, a top seed in the first round here. Boston's the other one. Boston, Miami, Milwaukee. I don't think the 76ers could be in play there. One of those top teams in the very first round. Now, the Charlotte Hornets are locked into the play-in bracket. They don't have enough games left to make up the ground to make a top 6 seed. Miles Bridges is in the running for most improved player of the year. He's been excellent. And some of the marketing materials that Charlotte has released to make the push for him to be player of the year has been excellent. Some of the patches, and they put out a cassette tape with some epic calls of some of his dunks, and some of the material is just great. They've released to kind of make a push for him to be most improved player. He's currently the leading scorer, 20.3 points per game. LaMelo's averaging 20 points per game. Terry Rozier, Scary Terry, 19.4. Gordon Hayward's been a great loss to this team, but they're still rolling. They're still doing pretty well. Charlotte Hornets always scoring, sometimes playing defense. Those are the Hornets, and they'll be from the play-in. But again, Cavs, Nets, Hornets, Hawks. Nets will surely be in. It'd be stunning if they didn't take one of these spots. And who will make the 8th seed to play the Heat, the Bucks, or the Celtics? Our other play-in participants will be the Atlanta Hawks, who have won 4 straight games to move over 500 at 40-37. Their final schedule is home against Brooklyn, at Toronto, home against Washington, at Miami, at Houston. So this is going to be kind of a tough stretch here for the Atlanta Hawks. They might need 2 games to make it in if they end up in the 9-10 spot there, which is kind of what it's looking like. It'll be fun playing Cavaliers, Nets, Hornets, Hawks. These will be fun teams to watch for the 3 games that'll be played to determine the last 2 slots. Again, I'm expecting Nets, and I think the Cavaliers still with what they can do defensively. So I expect the Cavs to hit the 8th spot in the East, would be my prediction on that. Heading into our top 6 right now, which are more than likely going to stay the top 6 in some kind of order, and we're going to work backwards. The Toronto Raptors, which, again, this is very fluid. Philadelphia 76ers are at 4, Chicago Bulls at 5, Toronto Raptors at 6. Bulls Raptors have the same record. Sixers are a game and a half up right now. Toronto's been a little bit surprising. Pascal Siakam did not have a great season last year, and he's been fantastic this season. Currently averaging 22 points per game, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. Been very, very efficient for this group. Fred VanVleet, no surprise, 20 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 6.6 assists. Of course, I'm reading off stats and not how efficient they are statistically. We can certainly get to that. Rookie Scotty Barnes has played 69 games for them this season, averaging over 15 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists. He's been excellent for them on both sides of the basketball to the point where he's elevated probably above Evan Mobley in terms of how many votes he's probably going to receive for Rookie of the Year. Cade Cunningham, of course, as I stated, has worked himself back into that conversation. We're going to have a great class of rookies probably moving into year 2 based on their performance in this season. So this has been a group that's really improved after, post Kawhi, which was still 2 years ago, but coming out of that, it looked really bleak. Pascal Siakam was thought to be kind of washed up. Fred VanVleet has always been speculated as, for a long time, a backup guard when Lowry was there and then too small. Gary Trent Jr., when he was coming out of Duke, didn't do much, wasn't thought to be much of a contributor. He was a second-round pick. I mean, players have to fall the second round. Not everyone can be a lottery pick, but he took time to develop. Scotty Barnes, no one was sure about him coming out of Florida State or his offensive game, but this group has really put it together, and this is a great squad, and they're fun to watch. The remaining schedule is home against Miami, home against Atlanta, home against 76ers, home against Houston, at New York. So they have a great home stretch here to possibly move up in the standings a little bit. Next up, the Chicago Bulls. DeMar DeRozan, possibly getting some MVP votes. He's completely been able to kind of rebrand himself in the mind of fans and writers and everyone outside of the league who's always appreciated him as a player. He's played in all 72, almost all their games, 72 games this season, putting up 28 points per game, also adding all over the place here. 5 assists and 5 rebounds per game as well. Incredibly efficient. Again, MVP level. He's fallen out of the conversation a little bit. Is basically focused on Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, and Devin Booker getting some buzz late as one of the most prolific scorers on the best team in the NBA right now. Tatum getting a little buzz as well with the resurgence for the Boston Celtics. But DeMar DeRozan on this Bulls team, which has been floundering a little bit in the back half of the season, still second in the division behind the Bucks, which again, divisions in the NBA don't really account for anything. 4 or 5 teams in the division or the entire division could make the playoffs. No one's hanging division title banners. But again, 45-32 could move down a slot if Toronto's getting feisty. Could move up a couple spots even still in the standings. Signing Caruso away from the Lakers and bringing in Lonzo Ball. Of course, this was publicized a lot in the beginning of the season, more than now, but one of the best defensive backcourts in the entire league, putting pressure on opposing ball handlers and shooters and wings. Asu Dasumi, there we go, was a great draft pick out of Illinois as well. He's been a great contributor. He's played in 72 games for the group as well, and McGrade off the bench when needed. So this has been great, what they've been building here around, Zach LaVine, who they thought, might be looking to leave. And of course, why wouldn't he, especially after playing with the Olympic team and seeing what a real group can do after spending all these losing seasons with Chicago. LaVine is the second leading scorer, 24.6 points a game. Bringing in Vucevic from the Orlando Magic in a trade last season. We'll see how that ages, but he's a contributor on this group for right now. DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, the Kobe White draft pick from last season is now a little bit in the rearview mirror with how effective everyone else has been. Asumu was a great draft pick. So this group is coming along. Will they be able to really hang with some of the top teams going through here in the playoffs? We'll see. They're fun to watch, though. Chicago Bulls. Their remaining schedule: home against Miami, home against Milwaukee, home against Boston, home against Charlotte. Road game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, so they'll have a tough stretch as well. All these teams, playoff teams. Hornets obviously in the play-in. Everyone's still jockeying for position. So this will be a tough stretch for the Chicago Bulls. The Philadelphia 76ers currently locked into the 4 seed. Of course, we had a number of blockbuster trades, but made one of the big trades that we all heard about when they traded their defense in exchange for James Harden, pairing him with one nearly undefendable Joel Embiid, in theory giving them 2 elite scoring options, although James Harden is really struggling, and Embiid, who's been moving all this season as a top option and a top scorer without any assistance from Ben Simmons, who hasn't played at all this season and is in the MVP conversation, top 5 player this season. Could be number 1 player this season, although it's not really looking likely. And James Harden, certainly great on some nights and not excellent on others. But Tyrese Maxey has been a revelation for this team. He's currently the ball handler more times than not over James Harden, although he can play off ball as well. He's been an excellent first-round pick out of Kentucky last season, upped his usage, and he's currently averaging 17 points per game. He's been excellent, and he's allowed them to help make the transition off of Ben Simmons this season as a ball handler. Harden, of course. You have Tobias Harris, who's still there, chilling, hanging out, making a lot of money, and Joel Embiid. Shake Milton's still there hanging out, but this team's going to, I think, struggle with depth moving forward. DeAndre Jordan was a buyout. He's chilling at the end of the bench. Paul Millsap. Guys that are still logging a few minutes here and there during the regular season, but I don't know what this team's going to do in the playoffs, especially if Harden is struggling and they're having a hard time slowing down teams with multiple options. And as I'm recording this, they've ended a 3-game losing streak where they've lost to Phoenix, Milwaukee, at Detroit. That's not good. And they just beat Charlotte 144-114, so great for them. Their final stretch, road games to Cleveland, Indiana, Toronto, and then home against Indiana and that pesky Detroit Pistons team. Now the top 3 seeds are all locked in as staying clear of the play-in tournament. Boston's only a game and a half back from Miami, number 1. Milwaukee's 1 game back right now. So they're all super, super tight. Boston Celtics came out hot out of the All-Star break. Of course, there's talk prior to that about should Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum be broken up? Should Brown be traded? What's going on with the team? Why are they so dysfunctional? Well, the team is now 31-11 in this year. This calendar year, 2022. So they have completely flipped the script. The defense has been outstanding. Jason Tatum is in the, far MVP running. He's a little late to the party here, but he could get some votes. If he was performing this way all season, he'd certainly be in the running. Marcus Smart could win Defensive Player of the Year. Robert Williams could win Defensive Player of the Year, but is now hurt and missing, and his paint presence, which was much appreciated. This team was averaging 16 more points per game per 100 possessions when he was playing in that window during their turnaround post All-Star break. But with him out, it's going to be a a little bit more difficult. The remaining schedule for the Celtics: home against Washington, at Chicago, at Milwaukee, at Memphis. So tough road game stretch there. But this is still going to be, this is a team that could win the whole thing now. So that's just wild. Efficient scoring, efficient defense, and a number one guy. What else do you want? Jason Tatum is scoring over 27 points a game, in addition to 8 rebounds, over 4 assists. I mean, this is what you want. Now, the Milwaukee Bucks should be the favorite, still my favorite to win the East. Although they look like they don't care half the time. The depth isn't always there. Still questions about this, but Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course, could win MVP again. 30 points a game, 11.7 rebounds, 5.8 assists, a steal, 1.4 blocks per game. And he's just a monster on both sides of the ball. Chris Middleton, of course, has been a revelation on this team. Over 20 points a game this season. Over 5 rebounds, over 5 assists. Jrue Holiday, always known for his defense, also scoring over 18 points a game. Bobby Portis, after his finals performance last year, has been a key piece as well. Grayson Allen added, of course. So this has been a group that you still got to think is the favorite moving forward, unless Brooklyn can really kick it up. The Miami Heat are a little bit questionable. Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra, the coach, got into a blowout fight a couple weeks ago. Like a real blowout fight. You can find footage online, which is really questionable about the team dynamics there. They've had a couple rough stretches where they've lost a number of games. There was a 4-game losing streak they were on there where they lost to Philadelphia, to Golden State, to the Knicks, to Brooklyn. They've won a couple more since then. They beat Sacramento, and they won at Boston, which is obviously a big game with them being at the top of the East. But I don't know. I don't know about them. Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, Bam, Kyle Lowry was obviously added. Something about that group is it's a great team, but something about that dynamic is a little bit off. So we'll see about that. To backtrack just a little bit here, the remaining schedule for the Bucks is home against Dallas, at Chicago, home against Boston, at Detroit, at Cleveland. Again, this is one of the teams playing for the top spot, and they can certainly get there, matching up against Boston, who's also going for that top spot. There'll be a lot of speculation about, are they maneuvering to not play the Nets, who could end up in the 7th seed, but I don't know how the hell you'd map all that out and try to figure that out. So I'd be thinking just trying to get home court throughout the playoffs, and the number 1 seed would be your biggest primary here. 3 road games, 2 home games, and we'll see. I don't think that they'll be resting Giannis, going for the MVP and anything like that. So that's the home stretch for Milwaukee and for Miami. Again, ended that 4-game losing streak grabbed a couple wins. At Chicago, at Toronto, home against Charlotte, home against Atlanta, at Orlando. So that's a tough stretch of 4 teams all playing for the playoffs and seeding here. That'll be a rough stretch for Miami. We'll see if there are any more blowouts. We'll see if they lose their grip on that top spot. They'll be an interesting group to see heading into the playoffs. But I like this group. I like this entire setup that we have here. If I had to speculate, and I'm forcing myself to, I would think we're going to get the Bucks at the 1 seed. I'm going to say Bucks 1, Celtics 2, Heat 3. Toronto could still work themselves up to like a 5, I think a 4. Still a lot of room for changes. I'm going to say Heat. I'm going to say Milwaukee 1 seed, Boston 2, Heat 3, Philadelphia 4, Raptors 5, Bulls 6, Nets 7, which would in theory put them in with the Celtics in the first round, which would be interesting to see that matchup. And like I said, Cleveland is the 8, who could still be interesting. So we'll see. But that is the Eastern Conference heading into the final stretch here. Now, the West is much more interesting. Number 1 is the Phoenix Suns at 62-15. They have rolled through the entire NBA. Number 2 is Memphis at 55-23, and they have been phenomenal even without John Morant in several games. Golden State Warriors are 48-29. They've actually fallen back down to earth after a stellar start due to injuries. Dallas Mavericks have actually worked their way back up at 48-30. So Phoenix way up there. Memphis 7.5 games back, and then another 5.5 games back from that are the Warriors, and Dallas kind of grouped in there. Then Utah Jazz at 46-31, and the Denver Nuggets at 6th at 46-32 at 16.5. So the 4 through 6 spot kind of grouped up within 3.5 games of each other there. The play-in bracket right now at the 7 hole, the Minnesota Timberwolves at 44-34, the Los Angeles Clippers at 8 at 38-40, and that's again another big drop off there, about a 6-game difference. New Orleans Pelicans at the 9 at 34-43, and the San Antonio Spurs at the 10 at 32-45. Now, out of the play-in bracket, but not quite eliminated, of course, the much talked about Los Angeles Lakers at 31-46, and the Sacramento Kings at 29-49. Eliminated altogether, Portland Trail Blazers at 27-50, Oklahoma Thunder at 22-55, and the Houston Rockets at 20-58, tied with the Orlando Magic for the worst record in the NBA. All 3 teams still building, no surprise there. Portland decided halfway through the season that they were going to start a rebuild, unfortunately for Dame Lillard, who's been injured and out of the game. And this team, starting with the Portland Trail Blazers, they have lost 16 out of their past 18 games after, being upset specialists for a while there, after purging the roster. So they're probably not going to be a big upset, group here. They have road games at San Antonio, at Oklahoma City, at New Orleans, at Dallas, and then home against Utah to end the season. Probably going to be 5 more losses, quite frankly. Not looking great for this group as they are trying to figure out what the hell they're doing moving forward. Of course, Oklahoma City still owns a ton of draft picks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, still a star for this group, averaging 24.5 points per game. Their final stretch will be home against Phoenix and Portland. That's a game no one will watch. And then 3 road games at Utah, at Los Angeles, at the Clippers, games that all 3 of those teams will want to win. So not much to say about this group right now. And finally, Houston. Jalen Green has been a solid player for them, 16.6 per game. And not much to say about Houston right now. They're still figuring their lives out as well. Their final stretch, home against Minnesota, at Brooklyn, at Toronto, home against Atlanta. It'll be an upset if they can win any of those games and really throw a wrench into any of those teams' plans as they march towards the playoffs. Now, the Sacramento Kings made a very questionable trade when they moved off of Halliburton in order to acquire Sabonis. Of course, they moved off Hield as well, and there are a number of pieces, but the big thing was moving off of the young Halliburton and bringing in Sabonis, and that just has not been a great look so far. Recently, they've been 7 of 20, won 7 of their past 20 games. They've actually won 4 of their past 5. So that actually greatly inflates that number. They've been terrific recently. But they're 3.5 games, with 4 games remaining from the last play-in spot for the playoffs. And they have home games against Golden State and New Orleans, and road games against the Clippers and the Phoenix Suns. So 1 more loss, and they are out of it. And just a rough trade for the Kings and the Pacers, who are both horrible teams this season for it. So moves for both those squads moving forward will be interesting because they aren't talentless, but we just have a very competitive league right now. So I think that's good for us and tough for these squads. Now, the Los Angeles Lakers. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail here on them as they get more coverage than anyone currently in the playoffs. But Anthony Davis has returned now after missing 2 or 3 months. He's missed almost half the season worth of games. which has been problematic. Russell Westbrook has been horribly inefficient, and he's played more games than anyone on the team by a wide margin. LeBron James, due to massive 50-point performances, is actually averaging 30 points on the season right now. But this has been just a dumpster fire team. And the contributors outside of those three has been sparse. Malik Monk was an addition. Carmelo Anthony. They re-signed Talen Horton-Tucker. There you go. Say that 3 times fast. And this team has just been nothing. It's just a whole lot of nothing. So I actually hope that they don't make the playoffs so we don't have to hear about them, and we can get some other talent in there, and this group can reset. I have no idea what they're going to do with that. Next year, he's due just over $47 million. The home stretch for the Lakers is home against Denver, away against Denver, away against Phoenix and Golden State, home against Oklahoma City. They are currently battling the Spurs for the final spot right now, and they are a full game back. I just don't see that happening. So let's talk about the squads that are probably going to be in the play-in tournament. It's possible that the Minnesota Timberwolves could work their way out of it. The Clippers are locked into the play-in tournament. Pelicans and Spurs aren't going to be able to make up ground. So we're pretty sure that it's going to be Timberwolves, Clippers, Pelicans, Spurs. Yeah, that's probably what it's going to be. Okay, so San Antonio Spurs. Well, I'll admit, I haven't watched a lot of San Antonio Spurs. I don't know what the hell's going on down there. But Pop has been collecting young guys. DeJounte Murray has obviously been a guy, hopefully, that is known in NBA circles. 21 points per game, 8 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 steals. Keldon Johnson, Jakob Poeltl, Derek White. They're actually 8th in points scored per game and 8th in total rebounds. So they're actually able to do a few things. Not an excellent defensive team, but it's a team that Pop has been forming for several years now, since the loss of the well-known stars, of course. Parker, Ginobili, Duncan, years past now. They're 13 games under 500. I don't think that they'll be in the real playoffs, so there you go. Spurs currently in the 10 hole. The New Orleans Pelicans have been rolling on with no Zion Williams. That's a hell of a story that I don't know if he'll ever play for the Pelicans again. Not due to injury. Partially that, partially probably forcing his way out of there. That's such a convoluted story. Who knows? But they have been working their way kind of up from a rough start. They brought in, of course, CJ McCollum, who's been excellent for them. Right now, Brandon Ingram is dumping in 22.9 points per game. McCollum, 26 points per game. This has been great atmosphere for him. Josh Hart's been a great contributor when he was brought in. So it's great for the squad. They've been able to kind of push through the season with no Zion Williams after such high expectations. Currently sitting at the number 8 slot is another one of these teams that we haven't really been able to see play the whole season, and that is the Los Angeles Clippers. Paul George has just returned and been putting on quite a performance the past couple of games. He has only participated in 28 games this season, but he's averaging just under 29 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, 5.5 assists. It's rumored that Kawhi Leonard, who hasn't played the entire season, should be back in time for the playoffs as well. What is this going to do, with the guys who hasn't played with him this whole season? What are we going to see when guys don't know where to stand, where to go? Of course, this is a professional team, but when you're not used to the flow of things, and, at the end of the day, it comes down to maybe a couple possessions at the end of the game, and you're not familiar in the day-to-day basketball playing, then it could be problematic. But Paul George is back. Kawhi Leonard could be coming back. This is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the league, and the 2 best players could be returning, one of them for sure. And they are currently in the play-in, and I would expect them to make the playoffs as either an 8 seed or a 7 seed. They could jump the Minnesota Timberwolves if they win the initial game. and that'd be excellent. So they could play Phoenix Suns or the Memphis Grizzlies in the first round. That would be just wild. But much like the Brooklyn team that's still feeling their way around, and the 76ers team that has been playing together but still kind of figuring it out, the Celtics, who are now figuring things out without Robert Williams, and a couple of the other squads. The Warriors haven't played together. Ja Morant's been missing time with the Grizzlies, so they played as a complete unit but are still figuring things out. Just wild. But we could see completely different results in the playoffs here. Now, the number 7 seed, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the highest scoring team in the league. Defense is a little bit more of a question mark, optional some nights. But we've got the Ant and the Cat, Karl Anthony Towns, and of course, the young, budding superstar, and just an excellent interview, Anthony Edwards, who always has something hilarious to say. D'Angelo Russell has stepped up as well, and, this team's gotten a little better on defense than the turnstile that they were before, but they're still going to have to outscore teams in the playoffs. But Karl Anthony Towns, 24.5 points per game, just under 10 rebounds, 3.6 assists. He's looking like a real superstar, not just like a good player, borderline star for those casual fans, but really just a good player, at the past few years, because he just hasn't shown that superstar status. But now he's looking top flight. Anthony Edwards, 21 points a game, almost 5 boards, just under 4 assists. D'Angelo Russell, 18 points a game, 7 assists. If they can get a few more pieces next year, maybe we're looking at a real contender. But 10 games above 500 right now, that is awesome, and that is stellar. And this is the bottom half. These are the two teams that would be the 7-8 seed, presumably, and I expect to be the 7-8 seed moving into the playoffs. Now, the teams currently locked in to the playoffs that I would expect to still be there. 6 and 5 seed, Denver Nuggets, Utah Jazz, and they could move around a little bit, as well as the Dallas Mavericks, which are another game and a half up from the Utah Jazz, and the Golden State Warriors are another game up from that. So Golden State Warriors, Utah, and Mavericks and Nuggets are all kind of clustered together there within 2.5 games of each other in the home stretch here. And this is all an interesting group. So let's start with Luka Doncic. He's been stellar this season. He's averaging 28 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, and he's been stellar. They've moved, Porzingis out of there, obviously. Spencer Dinwiddie has come in. Brunson has been great off the bench. Hardaway's still there. So this has been a great group, especially since moving Porzingis and getting another contributor in there. And this group has just been rolling. Really make a playoff run, they're still going to need Luka to just explode and be an offensive supernova, as they just don't have the horses to kind of run with the top guys here, although they have their issues as well. But yeah, this is a real team now, without Porzingis, actually. Utah Jazz seem to have some issues. Donovan Mitchell is obviously still the main man there. This team is just not at the same level that it was. Gobert is still a monster. They're still top 10 in the league in rebounds per game and points per game. But seeing them win the championship was just a struggle to really see. Now, the Nuggets are getting ready to return Jamal Murray, arguably their second best player. They've, of course, been without him all year due to an injury, and Michael Porter was injured early in the season. He will not be returning. So bringing him back to play with Jokic would completely change the playoff, the shape of the playoffs as well. That is major, major, major news. And this team, could elevate above the levels that both Utah and Dallas could reach if he returns in even decent shape, really. Because I believe he's amping up practice right now. It's really a struggle when he hasn't played all season, as could be the case with like Ben Simmons and I'm missing someone else on this list. Oh, Kawhi Leonard. But, we'll have to see. It's possible that it completely raises the ceiling to new levels for the Nuggets and puts them in the Grizzlies-Suns conversation. Now, the Warriors, 7-8 seed. They've moved, Porzingis out of there, obviously. Spencer Dinwiddie has come in. Brunson has been great off the bench. Hardaway's still there. So again, Steph Curry in MVP conversation early. Klay Thompson comes back, doesn't quite look like himself. Draymond Green has been hurt. He's starting to come back, but there haven't been very many games played with Klay and Dre and Steph all play together, those three. Wiseman is out for the season, hasn't played. They've gotten nothing from the number 2 pick from last season. Jonathan Kuminga has looked solid. He was drafted last year, as has Moody from Arkansas. Don't know how much we'll see from those two guys, but again, they got to bring everyone back healthy for the playoff run, and they've got to figure out a rotation now, as they haven't had all these guys healthy together during the season, and who's going to play and who's not. So, and they're not going to have a break in the first round. There's no cheap first round they're going to get if they get Dallas or Utah or Denver or Minnesota. You're not going to have a game or two or a series to figure this out. So I don't think the Warriors, they're going to have a hell of a time. Now the Memphis Grizzlies should very much be in that next layer of contention, because I believe it's the Phoenix Suns, then the Bucks, and then a small group of other groups that could get it. Celtics, Grizzlies, still Warriors, Sixers maybe, Nets, and then another group below that, which is, maybe Nuggets could get there, Clippers, but those are long shots. I don't know. I didn't quite think that far ahead for this podcast. That'll be future down the line. But the Grizzlies, with or without Ja Morant, continue to roll. They lead the league in rebounds per game. They're second in scoring. They're sixth in assists. So they just efficient offense, just whip your ass offense. And they're fairly efficient on the defensive end too. Top 12 defense. And it's just an excellent team, with or without Ja Morant. Now, it'd be nice if he's healthy for the playoffs. He's been banged up. But this team, man, 55-23 overall. And that's, they have a great record with him sitting as well. Although with him in, clean up some losses. And he obviously has some L's that you see lurking on the schedule when you have long weeks and you're on the road. But, at 55-23, as amazing as the Suns' record is, man, if a few things had broken right, the Grizzlies could have been up there as well. They're just an amazing team. If you haven't watched the Grizzlies, you should be. They might be a number 2 watch behind the Phoenix, or it might be number 1 team to watch in the playoffs. Just amazing. And finally, the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker is averaging 26.6 points per game, 5 rebounds, almost 5 assists. He's getting MVP buzz, although I don't think he's going to quite get there. Chris Paul's missed some time with a thumb, although he's averaging almost 15 points a game, over 10 assists. And these two have just created a monster backcourt for the squad. Mikal Bridges plays great defense. Cam Johnson's involved off the bench. Aiden's stepped it up. Cameron Payne is contributing. JaVale McGee is contributing. Jay Crowder. This is just a group that looks like, listening to some of the major networks is just going to roll through the playoffs. As much as we're like, well, this is a deep East or this is a deep West, and there's a number of teams that could also all of a sudden explode and be great because of question marks. Clippers could all of a sudden return their best players that haven't played all year and be great. Denver could do the same. Ben Simmons could return to Brooklyn and do the same. And then we're like, oh, but the Suns are just going to win the whole damn thing because the ceiling is so much higher and the floor is so much higher that it just doesn't matter. And this team just might do that. So Phoenix is going to be 1. Memphis is going to be 2. I don't think that's going to change. We're going to have our play-in games, but I think it's going to be Clippers in the 7 and Minnesota in the 8. And then that middle group, let's see, I think Dallas is going to end up the 3 seed, Golden State Warriors the 4, Denver the 5, and Utah the 6. That's my projections. So Phoenix Suns, Memphis Grizzlies, Dallas Mavericks, Golden State Warriors, Denver Nuggets, Utah Jazz, LA Clippers, Minnesota Timberwolves is how I project that first round. And they actually give us a first-round matchup with Clippers, Grizzlies, which would be fun. Warriors, Mavericks, so that seeding doesn't matter that much. So yeah, I think we'd have some good matchups in that first round. It's still not out of the question that we have a Phoenix Suns, LA Clippers first round with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George rejoining the Clippers. That'd be wild. So very excited for the playoffs. That's kind of just a brief overview with where we're standing heading into the home stretch. I appreciate NBA history and the awards and who wins them and the finalists, but as far as actually predicting winners, I care less about. Who do I think should be NBA this season? I'd be fine with Nikola Jokic holding down that entire Denver Nuggets team. Without him on it, I don't know what the hell that squad would be, with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter being out. What he contributes is just amazing. At the same time, Embiid has held down that 76ers team with no Ben Simmons, and Giannis on the Bucks has been incredible. I think that team would be a little bit better shape without him there than the other two squads would be without their respective stars. But, it'll be great to reflect in history where the final standings are and all that. But as far as which one I think I should be MVP, I'm fine with any of them. So as far as which one I think should win, I'm really indifferent. I would vote for Nikola Jokic, I think, and what he's been able to accomplish. Defensive Player of the Year, Draymond Green is currently favorited from what I see, although he's missed a hell of a lot of time, and I think that there's other folks that could be in contention. I don't know why Giannis and Embiid and some of the others wouldn't be lined up for that one as well. Tyler Hero is right now the shoo-in to win 6th Man of the Year, and that just shows how important his scoring is to that Miami Heat team and how important it will be for them moving forward into the playoffs. Most Improved Player, and again, these awards are all over the board, and this 6th Man is one of them, and judging guys that have started some games and guys that have come off the bench for some games and guys that have come off the bench the entire year, the rules on that are a little fuzzy, and they're very fuzzy on Most Improved Player. Ja Morant is in the running. Seems like he'd be run away for that award, right? Darius Garland, though, also in the running. Superstar right now. Miles Bridges, who I think should be the winner of that award. We saw star potential with Ja Morant, obviously, and what he was able to do the past couple of years. Darius Garland has taken huge steps, but Miles Bridges, who's been a contributor and at times looked like he might be out of the league in a couple of years, and is now not only a solid contributor, but a main piece on that Hornets. Shouldn't he maybe be the front runner for this award? I don't know. Maybe they should split it. Maybe we should just do that. Maybe we should have an all first team, most valuable, most improved player. Maybe that's what we should do. Rookie of the Year now. Evan Mobley still getting a lot of votes. Scotty Barnes from the Raptors in the running there. Cade missed too many games, unfortunately. And Coach of the Year, Taylor Jenkins, Billy Donovan will both be shown some love. So Donovan, of course, in Chicago with the Bulls and the full remake they've done over the past year and a half with that squad and the entire roster. And Taylor Jenkins, only 37 years old, there with the Memphis Grizzlies, the former Milwaukee Bucks assistant, who's just crushed it there with that whole squad, regardless of whether Ja Morant's in the lineup or not. Regardless of whether Jared Jackson Jr. has been able to play, which he has a lot more this year. And just building a great culture there in a city rich with culture, and regardless of which superstars are playing, they come out hard every single night. So enjoy the end of college basketball and the final week or so of the NBA season, and keep an eye on how things kind of shake out here. What happens with the Nets, what happens with the Nuggets on some of these key teams. Keep an eye on the Memphis Grizzlies. Try to watch these teams as they come down the stretch. The Celtics, the Suns, and get ready for the playoffs starting Saturday, April 16th. The NBA playoffs coming to you soon. Boom, boom, boom.
All my blessings. 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 All my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that. turn it to a